I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I am here in studio with my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together, Rebecca and I are going to craft yet another unbelievably good episode of For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and families, and the raccoons and the bears and the wolves and all those other mammals and all those other critters and plants and protistas and bacteria and all those things that we share this planet with, because, like it or not, we're all wrapped up together on this wonderful little planet called Earth. And we have a wonderful show for you today. We're just going to chat for another 10 minutes or so. This is our introduction. Then we have an interview with Helena Volzer, who is from the Alliance for the Great Lakes, and she's going to be talking about water usage, and specifically these new data centers and how much water they use, and how big a strain this is on our ecosystems. Then you hear from our advertisers and patrons, to whom we are eternally grateful. And then it's Rebecca. And Rebecca, what will be your topic today?
In my continuing, Detroit series, it's the River Rouge.
River Rouge. Okay, sounds good. And after that, it's Ecological News. And hopefully, at some point during this week, as every week, we hope to hear from you at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. Okay, well, Rebecca and I had a little trouble getting into the studio on time this week because it is pretty slippery out there. It's kind of nasty. Be really careful. Yes, it is winter, but on the other hand, it's also December.
I got ice bikes now. I got ice bikes that I'm strapping onto my shoes so that I can maybe not fall down and be in nursing home for 3 months like last year.
Yeah. Well, that's prudent. Very prudent.
I feel it is.
Yeah. And things are slippery, but we're only about 4 degrees below average, according to my weather apps. And so, it's December, it's cold, but people forget this is normal. The Decembers for the past several years have been, way warm and almost no snow, and so.
Also, my neuropathy hurts a lot, and my bum leg from last year because it's really, really cold.
I'm sorry, Rebecca.
Thank you.
But on the plus side, you'll live longer.
Will I?
People in cold climates live, much longer on average than people in warm climates.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
I think that's true.
Well, at least it seems longer. Right? So you'll get to enjoy those aches and pains for about another decade or so than somebody who moves down to sunny Florida and blissfully lives, but then they die much younger. So
they got monkeys with herpes and stuff. And pythons now, of course, they're all.
Right.
Surprised anybody's left alive in Florida. Jeez, it sounds scary.
Yeah, we're not
Hurricanes.
advocating moving to Florida.
No.
So definitely not. All right. Well,
We're not advocating not moving to Florida either, mind you. So don't. Florida's a nice place in some ways. It's just a little intense for me, maybe.
Yeah. Well, one reason that we were running a little late today is I am a little bit run down today because yesterday I went to Columbus, and for a change, I wasn't going to testify in front of some subcommittee. I actually went down there for a science fiction convention called Galaxycon, which is a lot of fun. And it was interesting, my eco observations on that trip were that there's definitely more EVs on the road now because the parking garage where I had to park my van had about 8 electric car chargers, and all 8 of them were in use the whole time. So
wow.
Yeah. And also, interestingly, the Columbus Center there, the convention center, has a restaurant in it with a hydroponic garden where they grow all their own greens for all their dishes, their salads and, garnishes and all that stuff. It's really cool. It's literally, you're right there. You can see them growing. And it's just a reminder that when we set our minds to it, we can design systems that are more and more efficient, take up less and less room. Those greens don't have to be trucked in from farms 30 miles away. So you save all kinds of energy, and you avoid all kinds of pesticides and emissions. So those were kind of neat. But, of course, mainly I was looking at the other convention years because science fiction conventions have evolved quite a bit to the point, when I went, there'd be the occasional person who would dress up like this character or that character, but now that seems to be like one of the main things you do at a science fiction convention is show up.
Cosplay.
Yeah, cosplay, exactly. You show up dressed as your favorite character or whatever, and there were monsters. There were some costumes that were like 8 feet tall with dragons and dinosaurs and things, and it was really impressive. I took lots of pictures, but one of the main reasons I went, though, was to meet this one specific actress. I have had, a crush on this actress named Billie Piper for a long time, actually, literally exactly 20 years.
Okay, which one is she?
Billie Piper was the companion to the first and second of the new Doctors.
Okay.
Yeah, Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant.
Oh, she's the blonde one?
She's blonde. Yep.
Okay.
She's short. Well, actually, she's got red hair now, but
okay.
But I actually met her the first time at a science fiction convention 20 years ago, just before the new Doctor Who's were released. In other words, I met her literally weeks before this whole regeneration of the Doctor started with Christopher Eccleston. So, nobody knew her. This was actually her first big acting job. And it was kind of funny because there they had a costume contest that people dressed up for. And there was a point where everybody lined up to get in the grand parade of costuming. And she was kind of freaked out because, she had never seen what was going on before. There's all these swords and hatchets and she kind of came over and stood with my family because we were the only people who were dressed normally and looked, sane. But as she said, she's gotten over that. But I've been a Doctor Who fan since the 70s. My first Doctor Who was Tom Baker, and actually my first, when I really fell in love with.
He's the one with the dark curly hair, right?
Dark curly hair, long scarf, big coat.
He will always be my Doctor Who, and I'm really proud of the fact that I now have something which is almost a Doctor Who scarf. It's gigantic and it's similar colors and sort of terrifying, and I love it.
Yeah, me too. I've got a Doctor Who scarf that my wife wove for me on a loom.
Neat.
Yeah. But in that very first Doctor Who series with Tom Baker, it's called Robot, there's this scientist who who promotes solar power. And he's like, we need to get more solar energy. And Tom Baker's Doctor Who says, quite right. It's past time the human race starts harnessing solar energy.
Something about at one point he says something about being dependent on that chemical sludge, talking about oil.
Yes,
I remember that. He was always on about that. He did not like oil.
No, and so that's as an environmentalist, I was like, okay, this is cool. This is a science fiction character who is saying what needs to be said. And had we way back in the 70s gone full in on solar, we would be so much further ahead of than we are today in terms of dealing with climate change and eliminating CO2, because that energy has always been there. It's just we didn't do the work, the research necessary to make it a practical source of energy until this century, until the latter part of the 21st century. So, I had a nice little chat with Billie Piper. I paid the the $60 to get an autograph, and so I was chatting with her a little bit, and I actually, because I care about the Doctor Who character, I was like, there's a possibility she's going to be the next Doctor, because at the end of the last series, when the old Doctor regenerated, she appeared on the screen and said hello, but nobody knows what that means.
Ooh.
And she wouldn't tell at the convention.
Suspense.
So I told her, the Doctor Who. One of the cool things about Doctor Who's character is there's a little undertone of arrogance there, And she was like, and I said, I haven't seen you do arrogance in your characters yet. And she said, have you watched the series I Hate Susie? And I said, no. She said, watch that.
Oh,
and I was like, okay, I will.
That was something else she was in, I guess.
And as soon as I walked away, I realized I just gave an actress with 20 years of acting experience acting advice. And I was like, wow, what an idiot. I had like 1 minute to talk to this person that I've, admired for a long time, and I mansplained acting to her.
You're a great bloody Amadon, a right Drongo.
That's what I thought there. Actually, she called me a Donnie.
A what?
Donnie.
A Donnie. What's a Donnie?
In English slang, a Donnie is a foolish, naive guy.
Well, she better stay out of Star Trek conventions, or out of science fiction conventions.
I think
it
was aimed at me particularly. It wasn't. She was not talking about her fan base. She was talking about me.
Okay.
So, all right. But maybe I am. Because I really think that giving people information like we do on this show, that talking about environmental issues and urging people to act will help.
Right.
And
yes.
I really believe that. Maybe that makes me, a Donnie. Maybe that makes me a naive, foolish guy. But maybe not.
There we
Hopefully
go.
not, because we got to get through this together, folks. Because as they said back in the 1970s, Tom Baker, Doctor Who himself, it's beyond time that we do this, and we are doing it. That's the encouraging part.
How do you spell it, with a Y on the end?
Donnie?
Yeah.
Well, it's a slang word, so I don't know what the correct.
So nobody
spelling
knows.
is.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'd never heard this slang. Cool. All right.
It's in a couple dictionaries. Well, I looked it up, right? Because I didn't know what she was calling me.
Okay, did she say this to your face, or while you're walking? You got her so mad.
Yeah, I didn't mean to. I was just being very earnest, and I care about the character, and I wanted to see it played right.
Okay.
I'm like, wow, what an idiot. Oh well. So if there's any other Doctor Who fans out there, give us a call in at 877-909-1007 as soon as our interview is over, because it's already, wow, times are wasted here. It's already time to go to our interview with Helena Volzer. And she's talking about, some people say that data centers are the future, but one of the arguments against them is...
It's going to be a short future if that's the future.
Yeah, good
that's
point.
The problem.
Yeah, because one of the arguments against them is they're already halfway to being obsolete, because computing power continues to increase while energy demands continue to decrease on it. And so building these gigantic energy hogs is actually not a green future. And let's hear more about that from our interview with Helena. Hello and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and your title?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Helena Volzer. I'm the Senior Source Water Policy Manager at the Alliance for the Great Lakes.
Okay. And could you give us a little bit of background on the Alliance for the Great Lakes? Tell us about your
The-
organization.
Yeah, the Alliance for the Great Lakes is headquartered in Chicago. It's a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working throughout the Great Lakes region to protect the clean, fresh, natural waters of the Great Lakes. We work on a variety of issues from stopping harmful algal blooms and agricultural pollution to plastics, water infrastructure, water affordability, um, invasive species, and the water quantity issues that I'm here to talk about today.
Great. You're here today because you were at a speaker at a town hall not long ago that was organized by WGTE that was talking about the water use for these super data centers. Could you sort of go over what you said there at that meeting?
Yeah, sure. So, I think the question was that I can't remember the exact question, but if we want to talk about how data centers use water and why I was invited to the panel, data centers have both direct water needs. They need water for cooling inside of the data center. These facilities get very hot from the computing that they're doing. And so they use water in a variety of ways, and it depends a lot on what type of cooling method is being used, how much water we're actually talking about for the direct water needs. Evaporative cooling was the most common kind of cooling in a data center at the time of my research. The Alliance and I recently put out a report. It's called a finite resource. It's available on our website at greatlakes.org, looking at kind of all of these large water sectors that we do have in the Great Lakes, including data centers. And at the time of that research, evaporative cooling was really the most common, and that can use between 1 and 5 million gallons per day at the hyperscale data center level. And when that method's used, more than half of that water evaporates off, and that's what we call consumptive use. And so that's of concern because that water isn't reliably returned to the watershed where it came from in a reliable way, and so we consider that lost. So with that method, really high consumptive use of water, and then whatever isn't evaporated off is discharged, or it can be recirculated once it's cooled down. Other methods that we're seeing now include immersive cooling, where you're exposing the equipment directly to water, and closed loop systems, which are being used in some of the big data centers that use water and a coolant and bring that around to the server racks to bring down the temperature on the server racks as they get hot. And that method uses less water directly, but has really high indirect water usage. One of the things that data center companies aren't talking about is their indirect water use. And that happens at the power plant when we're talking about the energy needs that they have. They're also really large energy users. And so even with a closed loop system, you can have really huge increases in water use at the power plant when we're talking about coal or nuclear or natural gas, even fired power plants, which by and large is the power method that we're talking about here when it comes to data centers and the type of generation that's being added to accommodate, the vast energy needs of these facilities. So they use water both directly for cooling and then this indirect water use effect. And so the question really is, every state across the Great Lakes region is adding these facilities. What's the cumulative impact of that on our water resources, both on groundwater and on the Great Lakes?
Mm-hmm. Right. And it is kind of interesting that these, as you call them, hyperscale data centers, which are these new data centers that have campuses of hundreds of acres and gigantic buildings, they seem to be signing power agreements almost exclusively with the most polluting and most consumptive forms of energy generation in terms of nuclear or coal or natural gas.
Yeah, and the federal administration has taken steps to ensure that coal plants remain online longer, that nuclear plants have been kept open, to specifically because of the needs of AI, Palisades and 3 Mile Island, even to power the vast energy demands of data centers. And so, there's one of our partner organizations, Clean Wisconsin, did a really great analysis looking at this indirect water use effect with these different types of fuel generation, and even the power plants can use different types of cooling methods, at the power plant. And so the Port Washington data center in Wisconsin, for example, is a 3.5 gigawatt facility at full build out. And the water use needs are just staggering, no matter which type of cooling method you're talking about. And this is for one data center, remember, for one facility in Wisconsin. And so, they just have really large water and energy needs. And I think one of the policy recommendations that we make in our report, from the groundwater perspective, is we need more regional demand studies to kind of help inform our siting decisions, because where you choose to locate a data center really can have more or less water resources impact. And so these studies, Ohio has done one for the central Ohio region, which has really seen the most data center expansion. And it identifies gaps in water capacity at 2030, 2040, and 2050, where communities will be faced with water challenges. And they're moving on now to do the southwest portion of the state. This study was done in coordination with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Ohio EPA, and the Central Ohio Planning Commission. MORPC provided some population data as well, because if these data centers do generate additional economic activity in the form of jobs and employment, then we can also expect population to increase, and the population will also have needs for water. One of the other big challenges with data centers is that they connect to municipal water supplies most of the time. Mm-hmm. Over 97% of them are connecting to public water systems. And so when they do that, right, we lack any information about how much water they're actually using on a regular basis. That water use reporting requirement really falls to the water system to report back to the state. So there's no registration or consumptive use permit requirements that apply when a data center plugs into a municipal water system. And so that makes both predicting demand and also just really having a sense of how water is being used very, very difficult for us. And then on top of that lack of transparency, you also have non-disclosure agreements being used sometimes during the siting process of these facilities, which can obscure the water and energy that's proposed to be used at the outset of siting. So a lot of the biggest challenge, I think, is that we have a real lack of understanding about this total water use footprint of an individual data center. Some companies have released, their water use information in the aggregate, but that really doesn't give you the whole picture when you're looking within a watershed of what the water resources impact will be, both on groundwater or surface water, depending on what you're talking about. But again, I think Google has released some information about a few facilities, but no one's, openly releasing how much water these facilities consume. So even that 1 to 5 million gallons a day figure that I cited at the top, that just comes from my review of the literature, and kind of the Washington Post is the one that's actually reported that 1 to 5 MGD figure. So it's really difficult to get a handle on how much water we're actually talking about.
Mm-hmm. So 1 million gallons a day, that's the consumption of about how many households would it?
Yeah, over the course of the year, you do the math on what the average American consumes in terms of water. So over the course of a year, that's 1 million gallons a day. That's 365 million gallons in a year. That's equivalent to about 12,000 Americans' use.
So each one uses roughly like a village's worth of a small city's worth of water. And one of the points you guys make in your report that came out in August is that increasingly, businesses are sort of locating into the Great Lakes region because of the water, and that the state and local governments really aren't prepared to deal with consumptive industries that have the potential to use up the water.
Yeah, we have other, sectors. Our report touches on critical minerals mining as well as agriculture. The Great Lakes region is a heavily agricultural one. And so we have agricultural users who rely on our groundwater for irrigation purposes. And with climate change, we're seeing an increasingly farmers turn to irrigation in places they historically hadn't. So parts of Northwest Ohio and Wisconsin now are using irrigation in these peak hot summer months. And we've seen drought, as you know, in parts of Ohio this summer and last. So becoming more of a trend, we're seeing these hotter and drier summers extending into the fall. And so, that has the potential to overlap with a new large water user coming to town. And we've always had large water users in the Great Lakes region. We've had steel and manufacturing industries come. And so we've had large water users before. I think what's different and what's new about this particular industry is the scope, the scale, and this connection to municipal supplies in the amounts that we're sort of talking about and looking at here. I don't think it's kind of unprecedented for all of this to be happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And worst case scenario, is it possible that people's wells could run dry, that municipalities like Bowling Green could find themselves with insufficient water supplies?
Yes, yeah, and we have existing groundwater conflicts throughout the Great Lakes region. I should mention, Southwest Michigan has seen conflicts between agriculture and homeowners and developers there. Central Sands region in Wisconsin and Little Rock Creek in Minnesota, those are more agricultural conflicts over water there. And then one that I mentioned in the report, and is really the first case in the Great Lakes region that I'm aware of, where an EV battery plant and a data center just west of South Bend are suspected to have caused a drawdown in residents' wells during the construction process of those facilities. When they're building these large-scale facilities, they use a process called dewatering, where they pump out the groundwater during the construction process. And so it was that process that's suspected to have impacted their wells. So it remains to be seen if that continues on after those facilities are built. There was a piece in the New York Times not too long ago about I believe it's a Meta data center in Georgia. That similar process happened. The dewatering process affected residents' wells, and there's dispute about whether or not that now continues after the facility has been completed and is continuing to use water, about how that's impacting residents. But absolutely, there's potential to impact residents' private wells, to increase conflict over groundwater if we're not making siting decisions, again, that are informed by water demand studies about where it's sustainable to site these facilities. And so that's kind of what our report does, is kind of sound the alarm about that. And, by and large, the state laws that govern groundwater and allow the state agencies to intervene really don't allow the states to curb or limit or halt groundwater usage until there's been some kind of adverse resource impact. And you mentioned Bowling Green. In the case of Bowling Green, their water supply source, as I understand it, is from the Maumee River, which has been really low lately because of the drought and the siege effect. But Bowling Green looking increasingly, because of water quality issues, also turning perhaps to Toledo as a drinking water source, which would draw on Lake Erie. So that, I think, is a good example. It's not a groundwater conflict, but an example of how increased pressure on groundwater resources might eventually drive some more pressure on surface water resources too, and on the Great Lakes.
Right, and this show focuses on ecology and environment. And I think it's important for us to note that the environment, the ecological uses of water, keeping the forests green and keeping, plants and animals having enough water to survive, they always seem to sort of be last on the list. And in places where there's enough of a conflict where humans are fighting over the water resources, the natural world that we depend on often gets knocked out of the ring at the beginning of the fight.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because even the Central Ohio water demand study that I mentioned earlier, which I think is a fabulous tool, it has a dashboard, like I said, that identifies these gaps where there will be gaps in capacity for water, did not take into account these kind of environmental and ecosystem factors. How much water do we need to sustain fish populations or groundwater-based flows that we already have? And so without that critical piece of information in the demand calculations, you're then highlighting areas where water may not actually be as available as we think it is, and without impacting those like you said, the natural world. And so we're hopeful that, Ohio will take that into account in the next study it does for the southwest portion of the state. But that's an important aspect of these water demand studies, that it should be incorporated as other states look to do the same thing. Indiana has authorized kind of a framework for water supply and demand study as well, but they did it by executive order. And as far as I know, there's no funding attached to that. So we'll see whether or not the Indiana legislature approaches that now. And then Illinois is another state that I know has done some of these studies, but there's a real need for them, and there's a real need for them to happen quickly, because the state level economic development corporations are not thinking about water when they're making these decisions about where to site these facilities. Local communities might be, but the ones that are actually making decisions about where to site these large facilities and incentivize their locations should be turning to this kind of study when they're making those decisions.
Mm-hmm. And the lakes themselves are dependent on groundwater, right?
Yeah, more than it's between 20 and 40% of our Great Lakes actually originate as groundwater. So they're an interconnected resource. People don't often think about the groundwater under their feet, but it is connected, for one thing. And our Great Lakes are finite too. The title of the report is a finite resource, and less than 1% of the Great Lakes are replenished every year from snowfall and rain and precipitation and groundwater. So you can see that the interconnectedness of the resource is kind of why we chose to study this issue, as well as this convergence of demand from a variety of sectors.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Our report is available at greatlakes.org. We make a number of policy recommendations. I talked about transparency, the need for regional demand studies. Some of the other issues we didn't get to, there's a need for conservation and efficiency standards that both for water and for energy that kind of are considered in harmony with one another because of that water energy nexus I talked about. And then sales and use tax incentives are another feature that states have enacted. All of the states in the Great Lakes region have enacted to really attract this industry over the last 20 years. And I think there's a real question about whether or not, number one, are those incentives still necessary? Because it's millions of dollars the state could be collecting and repurposing, right, to put toward things like regional demand studies and maybe some registration and consumptive use permitting requirements that include some water use reporting for these facilities that are connecting to municipal water supplies. So encourage folks to read the report, share it with your state and local elected officials. And thanks again for having me on today.
Okay. And that was our interview with Helena. What do you think? Give us a call at 877-909-1007. And I just wanted one last point I wanted to make about the whole science fiction convention. There were thousands of people there, and they all put tons of effort into either getting there or making their costumes or, buying shot skis or they're putting lots of their time and effort into all these fantasy things, which is very human. I'm not knocking that at all. But wouldn't it be cool if as many people put as much enthusiasm into the reality of trying to preserve our planet, the reality of trying to overcome these challenges like global warming and water usage, over usage of water. And, if we were all putting the same kind of effort into fixing the world's problems as we are to escaping the world's problems.
I kind of know my friend Annie Kroll kind of does that. She dresses up in costumes a lot. She's like a stilt walker, does all these kind of, makeup artist, and she does things mostly for activism purposes.
Uh-huh. Well, which, is cool and human, and I'm not knocking it at all. Heck, I do it myself. But, we also need to pay some attention to reality, like the reality that Helena was just talking to us about this latest threat to the waters of the Great Lakes. That was Helena Volzer from Alliance for the Great Lakes. Okay, now it's time to hear from our advertisers and patrons. For Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District.
Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place, it's right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before by maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future.
Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or call 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And For a Green Future is, of course, also brought to you by our patrons. And those are wonderful people who've gone to patreon.com. That's Patreon. Patreon.com, searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page, and they chose a membership level that matches their budget, and every month a little bit comes out of their accounts, comes over to us, and that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air. So thank you to our patrons. And I just want to have a little promo here for us, and I just want to say for me and the entire FAGF team, the future isn't imagined, it's built. We are renovating FAGF to fit the needs of every generation. New leadership, a refreshed mission, and a digital backbone powered by AI to deliver timely climate action right to you. We hired Shabazz Khan as our media and communications specialist. Our media and communications will be connecting people with science, solution, and stories that matter faster, clearer, and more accessible than ever. The torch is steady, the flame is bright, and the message is simple. Care for the climate, care for each other, and act with knowledge, because the future belongs to those who prepare today.
We're going to get Joe a whole evil empire.
Yes, wouldn't that be nice?
An evil green empire like Poison Ivy. I don't understand why she was bad, but whatever.
Yeah, she's become more hero than anti-hero.
Yeah.
Definitely. So visit Joe DeMare foragreedfuture.org to join, learn, and act. And I want to also say that our listenership has gone up quite significantly. I got our Podomatic podcast report last week, and I want to welcome our new listeners because we've got quite a few. So thanks, Shabazz is doing his job. So, all right, Rebecca, your turn at the mic.
Okie dokie. Well, I've been hanging out in Detroit a little bit lately, so and every time that I go there and back, I go through this. Usually at night, this terrifying area where you're on a bridge and you're going through the sky and you're seeing all these sort of towers of light and darkness, and it smells bad, and it all looks sort of like Mordor, where the shadows lie.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I'm sure that this all has something to do with the River Rouge. And the River Rouge plant is around there somewhere. So this is called River Rouge. City? Is it a city? Is it a suburb? Is it a river? Yes. Okay, but mostly I'm interested in the river part. So, yeah, the River Rouge, which is pronounced like that because fur trapping, Detroit, blah, blah, blah. That's how it all started in Detroit right there, although it's taken a few turns since then. But
the Voyageurs.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the River Rouge is a river which joins the Detroit River at, which we talked about last week, at something called Zug Island, which is a highly industrialized island. Why is it called Zug, I wonder? Now I want to know. Maybe next week it'll be Zug Island. It's an odd name. Like, you just don't, it doesn't make sense, really. What does it mean? Anyway, the boundary between Detroit and the River Rouge municipality is right there, is basically Zug Island. And, it's kind of, it's called a downriver suburb. I think that has some kind of a connotation in Detroit. I don't know, though. There are upriver suburbs apparently and downriver suburbs, and they're different. So I don't know. But the River Rouge is 127 miles long. I want to find this out from Detroiters now. And it has something nice involved with it called the River Rouge Water Trail, where you can get in your kayak or canoe, whatever, and go on this certain route that they've kind of set up and mapped out. And it's in it's all contained with the whole river is in the Metro Detroit / Southeast Michigan area. And the suburb also contains the Fairlane Estate of Henry Ford. So that looks kind of cool. And it has this homemade artificial waterfall, I guess, that they made on the river. And the river actually has its source up in Rochester Hills in Oakland County. The watershed is 467 square miles, and it goes through 48 municipalities. So you can already see it's probably kind of important, because for that reason. The environmental importance would include, it's massively polluted. It's got heavy metals, PCBs, sewage, and petroleum in it. PCBs, again, being polychlorinated bipheноls, which are made out of benzene with some chlorine hooked up to them. They're bad, very bad. I also learned another new acronym or abbreviation I learned was CSOs and SSOs. Researching this, CSO is a combined sewer overflow. Usually occurs in older cities, and I'd kind of wondered about this in the past. Actually, what are they? What are these people thinking? But yeah, it happens when your sewer system contains one pipe that has both stormwater and sewage in it, And when it's nice dry weather and everything's going well, all the flow goes through the treatment plant, which the runoff arguably does not need to. Maybe, I don't know, depending. You can filter that naturally too with little streams that flow different ways and you got plants in them and stuff. But
Once they're in the sewers, yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty much either the treatment plant or the river.
there you go. Yeah, but when things go badly with this kind of system, say every single time it rains, just about, the whole thing goes into a local body of water, which is bad. An SSO is a sanitary sewer overflow, which happens when the sewage escapes and gets into the groundwater, usually at manholes. It comes up and it flows into another drain where it's not supposed to be. And so both of these things are bad, basically. They're really bad if you're the Rouge River. It's currently undergoing a remediation project, which is nice. The EPA started dredging in 2018 in industrialized areas, especially like the mile of river that is around the aforementioned Zug Island, which is a source of a lot of the Rouge's problems. It also underwent shore stabilization. Wow, I said that right. That's amazing. In 2017. And this is where I learned the phrase legacy pollution. The Rouge has legacy pollution. It's not good like legacy fashion brands. Those are, you can't really, look, I have legacy pollution. Look at my legacy pollution. I got it in a thrift store. Anyway, so partners in this with the EPA would be Honeywell, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Friends of the Rouge, which is a nonprofit group. The goal is to finish sediment cleanup by 2027, and they hope to expand this to clean the entire watershed, meaning like all the things that feed into this little river. And I got conflicting information on this, though. Some people are saying it's safe to swim in. Other people are saying, well, you can kayak in it, but, try and stay in your boat. And do not eat the fish. Really, everybody agrees don't eat the fish out of the Rouge River. I wouldn't have anything to do with it except for maybe a little boating, personally.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca, for that.
You're welcome.
And now it's time for Ecological News, and from around the world and right here at home. And we're going to start with a right here in Ohio story, unfortunately. This is a story that ran in Canary Media, and it was picked up by the Ohio Capital Journal on December 3rd. Title is, Ohio Scrapped a Key Tool to Fight Air Pollution, and Advocates Want It Back. So what happened is, back on September 30th, the state of Ohio passed its budget, and the Republicans, sneaky Republicans, snuck in there a repeal of something called the nuisance law. And what the nuisance law did was it allowed citizens, this is a legal action against companies that, quote, endanger the health, safety, or welfare of the public, or cause unreasonable injury or damage to property. In other words, if the factory next to you is killing you or destroying your property, you can sue them, or you were able to sue them. No longer. Those Republicans just eliminated that.
Oh, great. They can just destroy everything consequence-free. Wonderful.
Yes, you can no longer sue them. And
private property is supposed to be holy and sacred under conservative values.
Right, and actually the libertarians, too, who want to get rid of environmental regulations, all say, well, you can always sue them if they hurt you. But
apparently not.
Not in Ohio, not anymore. And so what this did, they snuck it into the House budget bill, which is 3,156 pages. They were hoping no one would notice. That was HB 196. But what's happened in the past is people who lived next to these polluting industries have brought these lawsuits, and then as a result of the lawsuit, the Ohio EPA got to enforce the Clean Air Act.
Okay, yes.
Because people who were suffering got to say, yes, they've...
So there's no enforcement mechanism whatsoever now, is what you're saying.
There's just a theoretical, because the Ohio EPA theoretically is able to enforce the Federal Clean Air Act.
Okay.
But historically, it would only do it when people brought these nuisance suits.
Okay.
And then they would go, okay, all right, we'll enforce it. So now...
but if they want to have anything to do, they better, they're just going to be sitting there,
Yeah.
Rearranging their office supplies if they, I don't know. Bureaucrats are good at finding things to do. They don't actually do anything, though.
So this is terrible. This is really sneaky and evil and awful. And another thing that it did was it blocked the use of citizen data for any kind of government or legal action. In other words, if the federal EPA or the Ohio EPA isn't doing the testing doesn't count no matter what it shows.
Spiffy.
Which is not only, I believe that would be illegal. You could challenge this constitutionally because, taking data and telling people about it and using it is free speech, right?
Yeah.
To be able to say, look, I measured and, the levels are 10 times the normal limit. This new law says that you have to ignore that, which is crazy. And again, increasingly, the Ohio state legislature is legislating against
scientists
against reality.
Who spent their whole lives studying this stuff and work for major universities, have multiple. These are private citizens,
right?
Just to be clear,
right.
They're not. Like, this includes experts who spent their whole life working in this field.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So
if it was paid for by or commissioned by citizens as opposed to either the federal or Ohio EPA,
so we're just gonna.
It doesn't count.
We're treating like people with PhDs like they're just some random yahoo running around.
Right.
Taking
like a
samples.
guy who got a PhD meter off the internet. We're just saying, what you, no matter what your credentials, what you've discovered is not important. So this is being sued. There's a lawsuit with the Sierra Club, Ohio Environmental Council, the SOBE, Concerned Citizens, and the Freshwater Accountability Project. They're all suing because they're making the point that all of this stuff is environmental law, and it, according to Ohio legislative rules, you can't stick unrelated things into unrelated bills. So they stuck it in the budget bill, which has nothing to do with getting rid of pollution level controls. And so hopefully they'll win. We'll see what happens.
Well, it's always cheaper just to let everything go to rack and ruin,
Well,
in the short term, anyway. In the very short term.
For the companies that are ruining stuff.
Right, yeah.
Much more expensive for the neighbors. So, and along those lines, on the federal level, EOS.com on November 26th, EPA to abandon stricter PM 2.5 air pollution limits. And essentially what happened is during the Biden administration, they reduced the amount of micro soot that you're allowed to breathe in from 12 micrograms per cubic meter down to 9 micrograms per cubic meter.
According to my inhaler use, I'm breaking the law.
Yeah. Well, if you spray it at other people.
Okay.
But the danger of...
Don't give me ideas.
The danger of these tiny 2.5 microgram particles is they're so small that when you breathe them in, they don't get filtered by your lungs. They literally are so small they just pass right through the cells of your alveoli and directly into your bloodstream.
Jeez.
So the EPA had estimated it causes this level of soot.
You just leave my alveoli out of this, Joe.
Sorry, they've been roped into this by the Republicans. So
yeah, they kind of have.
4,500 deaths a year are attributed to these tiny particles. And the crazy thing is that when the rule was put in place, industry opposed it, and the EPA was defending it in court. And what happened this past week is the EPA switched sides. The EPA said, okay, we're with the industries now, and we want to get rid of this rule that we made. A lot of companies, or a lot of organizations sent a strongly worded letter to Lee Zeldin, the head of the EPA, telling him, you need to start enforcing the 9 limit, the 2.5 limit. But, excuse me, but he, of course, is a fossil fuel advocate, and he says there's no such thing as greenhouse effect, and he's taken lots of donations from gas companies and frackers, and so, the strongly worded letter doesn't have any more effect than a weakly worded letter. Might as well just send him the word please, And, so anyway, enough of that, and now we're off to Asia, because the U.S. media has not covered this very well, but this season from mid-November till now and continuing has been an absolute disaster for Asia in terms of storms.
Ooh.
Yeah. They've had, since mid-November, there have been overlapping storms in Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, and Vietnam. About 2,000 people dead. There was one called Tropical Cyclone Ditwa, D-I-T-W-A-H, really wiped out Vietnam. It's all being driven by a super hot ocean. 1.2 million people have lost their homes and or livelihoods, that is, farms or houses completely washed away. Sri Lanka has the most deaths with 1,600. And, we're not covered this because all the experts are saying these are all global warming enhanced storms.
Yeah.
And officially in the U.S., according to our quote-unquote government, there's no such thing. And
the evidence that people are dying from global warming already is everywhere.
Yes. And so
we are swimming in it.
Literally, our hearts go out to Asia and the people in Sri Lanka and other countries that are really affected by this. And so it's important that we know, we can't just assume things aren't happening. Okay, next story.
I remember that island country that was, I think I mentioned in the first episode, it was just closing up shop because of global warming.
Yes.
Kiribati.
Right, and everybody has to flee to Australia. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to counter that a little with some good news. This is news.mangabay.com, and on November 18th, title, Colombia bans all new oil and mining projects in its Amazon. So 42% of Colombia is covered by Amazonian rainforest. And at the COP, it's one of the few positive COP announcements, they announced that they are ending all oil and gas drilling and exploration. So that is only about 7% of the Amazon, unfortunately. And the other countries that have more of it, like Brazil has 60% of the Amazon. Brazil, Peru, and Ecuador are all opening new areas in the Amazon to oil and gas, so that's terrible. But at least Colombia sees the light. And they've blocks 43 projects that were already planned. And so they might run into problems with the ISDS lawsuits, which is basically oil companies saying, hey, we were going to make money there. Pay us the money we were going to make. So it's not, it's going to cause them problems, but the president of Colombia looks at this as a moral imperative, and he says all the other countries should join me.
So fun fact, there are not one but two musical genres named Indo, after primarily Indonesia, mostly because there's one that is just contemporary Indonesian and adjacent areas pop. Uh-huh. And then the early Dutch equivalent of skiffle or rockabilly is also called Indo-rock because it was done mostly by Dutch Indonesians in Holland.
Well, that's cool.
It's wild.
All right. Okay, final story.
I've seen these guys in pictures. They look super cool.
I believe it.
Yeah.
All right, last story. Unfortunately, we got to end on a down note again.
Pooh.
This past week, Trump moved to end CAFE standards. Those are the miles per gallon standards that automakers are supposed to hold to.
Okay, CAFE standards?
It's called CAFE. It's like combined auto something emissions. I can't remember exactly what it means.
Okay, so if you're I'm picturing myself now sitting there in a cafe with like clouds of carbon monoxide in my face on the sidewalk.
Right. Well, what it is,
it makes sense.
Manufacturers average their miles per gallon across all the cars they make.
Okay.
So you can make a low mileage car, but you have to counter that with a high mileage or like an EV. The WhiteHouse.gov thing on this is full of lies and disinformation, just like totally false facts. And the problem, of course, is that the U.S. is running backwards because ICE sales, internal combustion engine sales, have been dropping steadily since 2017. EVs have been growing steadily, so forcing us to go back to just internal combustion means forcing the American auto industry into reverse, literally, and will knock us out of global markets. So, stupid.
And that's bad
evil,
when you're on the freeway and
and
suddenly
bad.
go into reverse. Not good at all.
That's it for this show. Thank you so much for listening. My apologies to Billie Piper. And come back next week.
Bye-bye.
Joe DeMare,
Rebecca Wood.
signing off.
No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done.